Hello and welcome to Mirror Football's latest video chat. I'm Ricky Charlesworth, the EFL writer, joined by two guests today as we preview a massive game at Wembley tomorrow, the Championship playoff final. Obviously, it's dubbed the richest game in football, and we're joined by, for a bit of balance, one of either side. So we've got Jake Murtagh, the head of nationals for digital titles at Reach, who's a Brentford fan. And we've got Ian Mitchelmore from Wales Online, who's the Swansea City football writer covering Swansea City. Hello, chaps. How are we doing?
Yeah, hi, gents. Thanks for having us on. Hope you're both doing well.
Hi, Ricky.
Good stuff. Jake, we'll come to you first, because obviously Brentford, I think from the outside looking in, a lot of people, kind of figure them as favourites for whatever reason, whether that's because they finished higher or, because of last season's experience. Do you agree with that? And do you think it's going to be a tight game, or what are you kind of expecting tomorrow?
I think they are favourites, but I think it's very they just have the edge. I think if you look at the two games between the sides this season, they've been really tight. I think the game at Brentford was 1-1. Brentford took the lead actually, but Swansea were a much better team that night. And then the return leg at the Liberty, it was Brentford who were the much better team, I think, and but Swansea got a kind of late equaliser. So I think there isn't much between them. If you looked at the two playoff games last year as well, they were really, really tight. So it's a tough one to call, really. Obviously, I'm hoping Brentford come out on top, but it really is whoever turns up on the day.
Ian, what would you say to that? Because obviously, they've got history, haven't they? Obviously, last year, Swansea will be wanting revenge for missing out on Wembley. How do you see it panning out?
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment from Jake, all things told. But, for me, I think if it was a two-legged game in the semi-finals, I would certainly side with Brentford, the way they play and that style and that intensity. But in a one-off game, I think it's a lot more even than people make out. So you look at the odds, and even Thomas Frank said it today. I understand he's going to try and take the sting out of things and look to take the pressure off his team. But I do think in a one-off game, Steve Cooper's shown that he can set up his team, change tactically, and try to negate the opposition, which he did brilliantly against Barnsley. They were two neutral. They were tense games. There was, they were horrific to watch. They weren't put easy on the eye, but they did the job, and he's capable of doing that. So in a one-off game, I think it's more even than people make out. But I can fully understand why Brentford are favourites, after the season they've had.
Do you think last year's Swansea on both sides, I guess, Swansea obviously got beat by Brentford, and Brentford obviously lost the final. So they're both trying to get one up on last year, aren't they? Do you think that'll add a little bit of spice to it?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, for Swansea, it was almost that narrative of they did well to get in the playoffs in the first place. You look at the way they did it. They had a great start to the season and tailed off, and then a spectacular win at Reading, coupled with Stoke beating Nottingham Forest, who capitulated in that last game. So that sort of romance and the story of how it all came about was kind of took over, and Brentford did it the other way, sort of almost the tag that they've obviously been labelled with. I hate to say it, Jake, but the bottlers, and it went the other way around. So they were firm favourites, and I think they deserved it over the course of the two semi-finals, and unfortunate to lose in the final against Fulham. But this time around, I think it's different. Both Brentford and Swansea have challenged the top two all season and ultimately missed out, but I think they're much stronger than they were last year. So yeah, revenge on the cards for both in many ways.
Jake,
I think Brentford, this has been a long time coming now. I think when we've first got into the Championship, we reached the playoffs in the first year, which was a great achievement just to be in there. There wasn't too much disappointment that we didn't go all the way and go up this year. But we're knocking on the door for the past few years now. I think last year was a little bit unlucky. If you look at the team we lost to Fulham, who had just come down from the Premier League, so there was no disgrace in that. And I think likewise, if you look at this year, people may say, okay, a couple of months ago Brentford were top, but that was after a 21 game spell, 21 game unbeaten run. They weren't points clear of their rivals or anything like that. So they were due a bad spell. It happens to every team in this division. Watford then went on a winning run, and if you look at the two teams who went up, again, teams who have come down again this season. So Brentford, to rebuild like they have done after losing, Ollie Watkins, who's now had an England call up, and Syed Ben Rama, two of their most creative players. No one could envisage that Ivan Toney would have the kind of season he has had either. So to even be challenging again from Brentford's point of view was brilliant. And from my perspective, if someone had offered me a playoff place at the start of the season, I would have snapped your hand off straight away. So to be 90 minutes away from potentially the Premier League is a great position to be in.
What's it like being a Brentford fan under this? You've had it a few years now, the Moneyball, if you want to put a lazy term on it, because, it is a lot of change, isn't it? You can see a lot of turnover in terms of players coming and going. I mean, do the fans, it's obviously had success, hasn't it? So I guess the fans, appreciate the way that it works, but it's very different, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of it, really, because I think, unless you're a club who's right at the top of the pyramid, every club is a selling club, But the way it works, we buy players who we can develop and who then have a resale value. So from a business point of view, it works as well. And I think clubs want to deal with us because, they get a decent resale clause in the contract, so they get a decent resale as well. So it kind of works for everyone, for all parties. The players who come to the club know we're not going to stand in their way either. So whether they want to see Brentford as a stepping stone to push on in a couple of years to come as well, that's fine. I mean, you only have to look at Vitaly Yanel, who scored in the semi-final. He got signed for, I think, 500 grand last summer, which is incredible. And he's been, up there with being one of the best players of the season for Brentford so far, apart from Ivan Toney.
Just on Toney, I was actually going to bring him up because obviously he's the guy for Brentford that everyone mentions. Ayew's the one for Swansea that everyone mentions. Obviously, you guys watch them week in, week out. Is it a case of they are the most important player, or is there someone that goes under the radar, do you think, for both your teams?
Yeah, I can kick that one off. I mean, Andre Ayew, I think, given that he's played Champions League football, he's played in World Cups, he's on hefty wages as well for a Championship player. You expect that kind of quality from him, and he does deliver it, when he's under pressure. We saw it with that streak of penalties. I think he scored in 4 consecutive games from the spot, and a couple of those were in the, deep into injury time as well. So he thrives under pressure, and he is that big game player, as you saw in the first leg of the semis against Barnsley, where he barely had a kick in front of goal, and then a moment of magic, and he puts them 1-0 up. So that's what big money buys you, and it's something that these two clubs don't really have. So he's going to be a big game player, but make no mistake, there's a lot of other key players in there. Jamal Lowe's had a good season coming in from Wigan just over a year ago for less than £1 million, and he's been Steve Cooper's most expensive signing since he's been here. It was about 800 grand. So it sort of shows where they've come from, having been relegated 3 years ago, to similar path to Brentford in terms of the way that the model works, selling big players, Joe Rodon, Ollie McBurney, Daniel James to Man U before that. So sort of similar paths between the two teams and how they've gone about things.
Jake, it's not just about Toney, is it?
No, I think what people look at his goals record, because that's what they see in him winning the Golden Boot and breaking records and stuff like that. But what they also people don't always mention is, he contributes a lot in terms of assists and also his defensive work as well. He's always back at corners, and he really defends from the front. Of course, he is Brentford's talisman, and they want him to be firing kind of on all cylinders tomorrow. But there's Brian Mbeumo who can chip in with goals, Sergi Canos as well, and the way Brentford are setting up at the moment, to be really attacking. So there's plenty of other players who can chip in.
Just in terms of those two players, Ayew and Toney, obviously, a lot of focus is on them. Do you think either club will keep them if they lose?
So I think from Brentford's perspective, we're talking about he must be worth upwards of £40 million now. So the way we work, I wouldn't. He'll be playing in the Premier League next season, whichever whether that's for Brentford or someone else. And he fully deserves it. I think before he came to Brentford, he may have been holding out for a Premier League move. He's made the step up, and the truth is, with a lot of these players, until they make the step up, you never really know if they're going to be good enough. People can predict and say they've got all the attributes, but you don't know. And the season he's had has been incredible, to be honest. So I think clubs will be snapping Brentford's hand off if they don't go up. And I think even if they do, there'll be people knocking on the door. But I'll be confident that Brentford will be able to kind of fend them off.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with Jake on Ivan Toney there. I mean, he's a Premier League player in waiting, and Brentford fans, of course, hope it is with them. But slightly different circumstances with Andre Ayew, because he's out of contract this summer. So tomorrow could potentially be his last game for Swansea. And given his hefty wages that I've already alluded to, that's not sustainable. So the only scope would be as if he was given a new contract on drastically reduced terms. But a player of his quality, he's only 31 years of age, captain of his country, Ghana as well. So he wants to play at the highest level, and he said he wants to play in the Premier League. So it looks highly, highly unlikely that he would still be a Swansea player if they don't go up.
Out of the two teams, who would you say is favourite?
For tomorrow's game? Brentford. I think, it's only marginal. I mean, it really is small margins. We take a look at the semi-final and Brentford getting that penalty. People say it's controversial. I think in the current letter of the law, it was a penalty. But, it is if that decision doesn't go Brentford's way and the momentum doesn't swing, who knows, how the game would have panned out. It's so hard to say. It was a red card for Chris Metham, deservedly so. And I think even if it had gone to extra time, Brentford were knocking on the door the whole second half. So, but it is a 50-50 game. It really could go either way. It's a mistake. It's a deflection or a bit of magic. It really is such a tough one to call because there's not much between the sides either in the games this season so far, the playoff games last year, and I think if you go back down the years, it was a pretty level record. Yeah,
exactly, Jake. It's those fine margins that Thomas Frank alluded to in his press conference today. I mean, you look at the first leg last season, a Rico Henry red card sort of swung it in Swansea's favour, missed the penalty and a great goal from Ayew to win it, but it could have been a comfortable win on the night in the end. But over two legs, Brentford showed their class and deservedly got to the final. Whereas in a one-off game, those tight little calls and one bit of luck, a red card, a penalty, anything, if it goes your way, you can do it. And, that's where I do sort of think Swansea are probably not as outsiders as people think. I still side with Brentford. I think they are the favourites and deservedly so because of the season they've had. But I think it's tighter than some people will probably be thinking.
I was just doing a piece earlier actually on the history of the playoff final, the Championship playoff finals. I think of the last 9, I think 7 have been won by a one-goal margin, which probably doesn't surprise people. They are tight, they are tense. I think one of them went to penalties as well. So you very rarely get, big wins, don't you, in these kind of games. I think Swansea's actually, that was 10 years ago when they beat Reading.
4-2, yeah.
Yeah, I think that was probably one of the biggest wins we've had in the last 20 years. So it's probably set up to be a tight game, isn't it, with the occasion and fans back as well. I know not as many fans as we would have hoped or liked, but 12,000 there, it should be a good atmosphere, hopefully. Do you think that'll play a part at all? Did you notice that in the semis, the fact that fans were there in terms of impacting the game?
Yeah, I definitely did. Doing the first leg at Oakwell, they had 4,500 up there, and credit to them, they were superb. And bearing in mind for them, it was the first time they got to see Valérien Ismaël, so it was a big moment for them, and they've had a phenomenal season. So you could feel it. There was a buzz, and Swansea did really well to sort of negate that and sort of take the sting out of it, so to speak. And then coming back for the second leg, 3,000 Jacks at the Liberty Stadium was phenomenal. And, going a goal up 2-0 on aggregate with, by the way, what was an absolute stunner from Matt Grimes. I think Callum Britton's still spinning there. It was superb, and they were fantastic from start to finish. A bit nervy towards the end when Collie Woodrow pulled one back, but they really made a difference. And it was something that we kept hammering away at Steve Cooper, asking him, what do you want? Second leg at home, does it make a difference? And he flat batted it every single time. And yet, after they got through against Barnsley, he said it was a clear advantage playing at home second because we had our fans. So a bit more even at Wembley with a split, but yeah, it did definitely make a difference in the semis.
Yeah, people talk about fans being the 12th man, and I think in Brentford's case in the second leg they really were. And it's not just the kind of energy they create, that the players feed off that, and I think in all of the interviews after the game, all of the players were saying, it gave them an extra little kind of percent. That we talk about margins, and it's one of those things, and equally the pressure on officials as well, because remember it was only one-sided, it was only home fans, and all cheering and demanding penalties and stuff like that. And I think they do make a difference for sure. I'm just glad for tomorrow that fans will be back. I know there isn't as many that both kind of clubs would have liked, but from Brentford's perspective, getting to Wembley last year and fans kind of not being able to go, it's great that 5,000 of them will be able to tomorrow.
Just wanted to touch on the managers to end on, because obviously, both of them done an outstanding job. We'll talk on Thomas Frank first, Jake. I mean, how good has he done with that club and that team? Like you said earlier about constantly changing, having to lose players like, Ben Rama and Watkins, having to replace them and still reaching those heights. I mean, Brentford fans must love him.
Yeah, he's done a really, really good job. I think, they didn't bring him in from outside. He was already as part of the back, the existing kind of coaching staff when Dean Smith left for Aston Villa. But he's taken to it seamlessly. And I think the way the club worked and they're set up for that to happen, it is very easy for people to slot into roles because they know the club. And I think that's the way that modern day football should be really now. I think gone are the days where, I'm thinking back to the years when we may have been in like League Two and League One, that you change a manager and every summer you get rid of 12 or 13 players. I think financially you can't run a business like that. But yeah, he's been great. The style of football we play is kind of first class and really easy on the eye. And I think the fans respond well to him. He done a lap of honour before the Bournemouth game just to kind of get all the fans firing, and they responded really well. So yeah, no, he's a bit of a an eccentric character on the sidelines, and sometimes he kind of clashes with opponents and that kind of thing. But we love to have him.
And on Ian, on Steve Cooper, obviously on his second season as a senior manager. I mean, again, what's the rapport like with the fans and him?
Yeah, it's been great. I mean, he's come in as quite strangely as something of a relative unknown, which is quite odd considering the job he did with England's under-17s, winning that World Cup in India in 2017 with star-studded team, many of which he's had at Swansea since and still has some of them as well. So he's done a terrific job in the circumstances, as we alluded to, similar to Brentford in what Jake said earlier. The model, it's been selling players because you have to in the Championship. If you don't go up, revenue drops, parachute payments drop. And again, I appreciate that's different to Brentford's situation, but Swansea won't be getting those payments anymore. They have to keep streamlining if they're not promoted into the Premier League. And he's been a big part of doing that. His attraction and his ethos, bringing in players, and they're buying into what he's done. So even though they are losing players, they've been able to improve from what Graham Potter did and then to what he's now doing and improving on his first season as well. So he deserves an enormous amount of credit for the job he's done since he's arrived. And, 2 seasons, it's been really tough. The bulk of it's been done sort of without fans for him, which is the same for everyone, of course. But, tomorrow should be a nice occasion for them to sort of show their love and respect for him once again in person.
Do you think he's another one that, similar to AU, will they struggle to hold on to him if they don't go up? Because obviously there's been rumours, haven't there, with Palace and Spurs. I'm sure there'll be other ones as well. But because of the job he's done, if you suddenly don't get up, then, he's going to be targeted, I guess, by so-called bigger clubs or certainly Premier League clubs.
Yeah, I was asked this exact same question about 2 hours ago on a radio station. And, I think West Brom are another who've had a close look at him. He's on their list as well. I think Spurs, probably with some of the other managers that are being linked there, that would probably be out of the question. But, you'll certainly be mentioned, bearing in mind Trevor Birch, former Swansea chairman's only recently left a role at Spurs to go to the EFL. So they may well have been a word put in there. But, like with anyone, if they don't go up, he's going to attract interest. And he's in the final year of his contract with Swansea after this season. So he's definitely going to attract interest. You look from the outside looking in, back-to-back playoff campaigns on a very limited budget when you've been selling key players year in, year out. It ticks all the boxes, doesn't it? So, if they don't go up, it would not surprise me one bit if someone takes a punt on him.
Absolutely, yeah. And finally, fellas, can't let you go without giving us a prediction. Ian, we'll come to you first. Score prediction as well. No sitting on the fence.
Okay, I've been consistent with this. In a one-off tie, I think it'll be won by 1 goal. And I'll go with Swansea. So if you asking for a score, I'd say 2-1.
2-1. Jake?
I'll go for the same scoreline, but I'm back in Brentford to edge it.
Perfect. That's just what we wanted. Nice, balanced ending. Jake, Ian, thanks for joining us. Thanks for tuning in as well. If you missed any of it, you can rewind on the Facebook page. But till next time, thanks for tuning in.
Cheers, guys.